Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are happy to have Dr. Ted Davis joining us again here. He's our leadership coach at Grace Strategic Services. Based out of Leavenworth, Kansas, he's helping so many. That's Grace, the number 4, success.com. And we're going to talk today more about the work he does with CEOs, corporate execs, entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals, and any of you out there who may be wanting to transition into a different career. So welcome back today. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Keeping busy, which I'm fortunate and blessed to be.
Great. Well, a lot of new-time listeners, viewers here today on the show, so why don't you just give us a little overview about yourself, what it is you do, and then I know we're going to really talk about the idea of effective communication today and really instilling trust in leadership.
Absolutely. That's what I'd like to talk about, but first a little bit about my background for those who haven't listened earlier. I am a retired Army officer. I was very blessed to have graduated from the U.S. Military Academy, West Point, and then served 22 years active duty. Retired in 1996, and then started my profession as a business leadership coach, trainer, and consultant. And so I've been doing that now for 27 years. And the focus of our enterprise is, I like to summarize it by saying that we help managers become leaders and help leaders reproduce themselves. When there are 4 kind of buckets of services we provide, we help companies, first of all, make sure that they will align all strategies, that we clarify their business models, clarify their value proposition, that we help them grow their people, and that we help them engage with their employees. So that's a little bit about me. And then I really appreciate the opportunity today to talk about effective communication and instilling trust.
Yeah.
One of the, I think, unique things that I like to emphasize is too often people think of those as separate. There's effective communication in one bucket. There's instilling trust over here. I absolutely believe and try to convince all of my clients communicating effectively and instilling trust is one skill set. I know it's 2 things because, we have to talk about them separately. The mind can only talk about one at a time, and we've got to teach them kind of linearly, one after the other. But I think we've got to visualize them. As leaders, you've got to realize that you are simultaneously trying to communicate effectively, and by doing that, you instill trust. And as you instill trust, you improve your ability to effectively communicate. I'm sure you can imagine the reason why that is so important is that if you don't trust me, everything I talk about, you are processing through a veil of suspicion, such as not much trust. And so the distrust, the suspicion is going to cloud your interpretation of what I have to say. Anytime we're communicating, I like to say there's kind of 6 strands. So as you and I are communicating, there's 6 strands. So there's what I intend to say, there's what I actually say, and then what you infer from what I say. Because you're going to take my words and apply your meaning to them. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is going to be inferred by your background, your vocabulary, and so forth. And that gets us into what is effective communication in just a second. But the other 3 strands then in a dialogue is what is it that you intend to say, what is it you actually say, and then how do I infer what that means?
Yeah.
And the more those 6 strands are aligned, the more effective the communication is going to be. And so I think it hopefully illustrates why trust is so important, because trust is a filter through which we infer what is the other person has to say. It's one of many. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. And, I think it's important for people to trust. I mean, that's something that's, hard for some people. But, when I'm a good sense of character, good sense of judgment, and I mean, some people are, but some people aren't. But knowing you, I'm just saying you have an amazing background, and I appreciate and commend you on your service and your work. And clearly, you're someone you could trust. I've heard the stories from people that have worked with you and what they say, and that's always true. Before you work with someone, find out what people are saying about them. But clearly, you are, a leader, and people trust you and come to you to learn about, this effective communication. And we're going to discuss some of that, the definition and really this criteria for even better communication today, and some techniques as well on how we can all listen.
Thank you so much for those compliments. And I think what you point out is critically important, is that communication is a ongoing process. It's not just simply the conversation that you and I are having today. It's, what have others said about us? And I've read your bio, and I see, man, you've got an impressive record in the communication field and in entertainment and so forth. I love the interviews and how you interact with other people as well. And so that's part of the communications, is what we gather around background. So making sure that those things that put an image of ours out there, what we say on our website, what we say in our social media, all those things add to our credibility. And when people evaluate one another, certainly part of do I trust you or not is, are you credible? One of the books I recommend highly to understand trust is Stephen Covey's magnificent book, Speed of Trust. Excellent book. And he talks about the fact there's really two dimensions that trust is built on. One is your character. What do I think about your character? Are you trustworthy? Are you worthy of my trust? And then secondly is your confidence. And that's where all these, resumes, testimonials that we share about one another, what we say about issues and about people and so forth on social media is critically important these days. So all those point to both our character and our competence. But if I could, one of the things I'd like to emphasize about effective communications is, first of all, understanding what is communications. I always like to go back to what are the definitions. And so communication is really a process of encoding. And I got to choose the words, so I encode my message as I'm thinking about it. I put it into the words I want to put out there. So I exchange idea by putting my words out there on the air. And then the decoding. So as you receive them, again, you translate those, and what do you infer from those? And obviously we're doing the encoding, exchanging, and decoding about information, about ideas, about our intentions, about instructions, and so forth. And then I think another way to look at the definition is that communication is both an art and a science of using words effectively to impart information and ideas. And I think that's very important for leaders to realize, that as you're communicating verbally, in writing, body language, gestures, all that, you are sending a signal to somebody about your intentions, about your activity, about your focus, and so forth. So as leaders, we've got to be very attentive to what we're communicating. So that's a little bit about the definition of the process of communication.
Got it.
But we often hear about the importance of effective communication.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I define effective communication is that it is creating a shared meaning or mutual understanding of ideas, desires, and observations among people. And the reason why I say it's a shared meaning or a mutual understanding and not agreement is because we can have effective communication, if at the end of our conversation, you understand my perspective and I understand your perspective. We may not agree with one another, but at least we have a shared understanding of our positions. And then if we're trying to persuade, that persuasion is another form of great communication. So your thoughts, does that make sense about effective communication?
Yeah, because you know what? I have a master's in communications. A lot of people who have masters say maybe you're not the best communicators, right? People say that all the time. But I've been in the field of communications for over 25 years, and I love it. And I love teaching people new things about, communicating. And I just want to share one thing with you. When I think communication, working in the press and television and radio, it's very simple. And I break it down this way to a lot of people when it comes to communication. Ready? I say, we learned this, I think, in elementary school. Give me the who, what, where, when, and why. Because that kind of sums it up. It's what we call a press release in the business, right? But it's simple as that. If you always ask yourself those 5 things, am I telling, the person who? Am I explaining why? Am I saying where? It's simply 5 things to think about, and it's a great way to always remember the best form of communication. At least that's that's the way I, describe it. And the best thing about communicating, I think, it just brings people together. It opens up more room for conversation. It opens up other people's thoughts and ideas who maybe aren't as brave, as bold, as, how do we say this, more outgoing, inhibitions lessons to speak up for a leader like yourself or like me. So I love teaching people, about the simplicity and the beauty of communication, as well as you, obviously, and I appreciate that.
Well, I think you've got a great formula, great checklist of what is an effective message, the who, what, when, where, why, so forth. It is absolutely superb, and I think I hope people took notes on that.
Thank you. Your notes are better, though. No, we can work together here. That's what we do. We're working together here today, Dr. Ted.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate that. So I hope they've taken notes of your 5. In fact, why don't you say that one more time, what those are? People take notes now. And what were your 5 again?
It was who. What? Okay, now I'm going to mess it up. Who, what, when, why, where. Might not be in that order, but yeah, who, what, when, why, where.
Okay. Now I will add another criteria to
Sure.
it. So your criteria looks at, obviously, the content of the message, which is critically important. Mm-hmm. I would add one to kind of the process. I've got kind of 5 requirements for effective communication. Number 1, it's got to be timely. Your message of who, what, why, when, so forth. I mean, it's got to be delivered when people need it. Not too soon, because if they get it too soon, they're probably going to forget it, and certainly not too late. So it's got to be timely. These people get the message on time. Secondly, it's got to be relevant. What I mean by that is that the information must be pertinent to the issue at hand or to the position that the person occupies. So is this relevant to the conversation? Is it relevant to the debate? Is it relevant to the decision making? And then the third part is it meaningful? And what I mean by meaningful is that it is pertinent to the receiver. So the receiver, himself or herself, they need that. It's in their interest. It supports their intentions. So it's got to be timely, it's got to be relevant, it's got to be meaningful. And then I think fourthly, it's got to be sufficient. And when I say sufficient, it's not just simply that there's enough information, but not too much information. Because too much information can cloud the image and then it all gets lost. So we've got to have sufficient information. And then fifthly, it's got to be accurate. At least as accurate as we can make it. Because obviously in leadership, we're trying to help people accomplish something. Right? Leadership is about getting things done through other people. And so in trying to ensure that they're well-equipped, not only with equipment, but are they well-equipped with information. And so the information has got to be timely, relevant, meaningful, sufficient, and accurate. So how do our 2 lists compare, do you think?
Love it. Beautiful. You're going deeper into this, and I love that. Right. Let's remind everyone, hold on at this time. Dr. Ted Davis, how can we contact you? Would you mind sharing, again, the website, phone numbers, any pertinent information?
Sure. My email address is TEDavis. It's TEDavis at Grace 4, the number 4, mysuccess.com. And my cell phone is 913-306-1499. So either call or send me a text. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's continue here. Where do we leave off? We have a lot going on today. If you are just tuning in, effective communication and instilling trust in leadership. Dr. Ted?
Yeah. Well, I think another thing that is the intersection of both what you were saying about the content of the message and I was saying about the process is what about the words? You know, how do we package it? And you've probably heard this in your communication experience, the acronym THINK. I believe it's a great acronym to kind of check, okay, is this the message I really want to share with somebody? And the T stands for, is it true? Is what I'm about to say true? Because if it's a lie, and unfortunately we hear an awful lot of those, it's going to take people in the wrong direction. So number one, is what I'm about to share with you, is it true? Number two, is it going to be helpful? Does it help them understand? Does it help them move forward? Does it help them solve a problem? Can they use the message I'm about to bring? Number three, is it inspiring? Does it encourage people to take the next step? Does it encourage them to move forward? Number four, is it needed? Do they really need to hear it right now? Do they need to hear it in just the way I want to say it? And fifthly, is it kind? So THINK is the acronym. So true, helpful, inspiring, needed, and kind. And I think you may not sometimes we've got to say what is needed and what is should be helpful and true. It doesn't feel good, yet it's kind because it is helpful, because it is true. Sometimes we do have to share painful messages, but in the long term, that's the kindest thing to do, is let people know ahead of time when things are going wrong. But more importantly, gosh, you got to let people know when things are going right. So you've got to praise quickly. So that's my kind of measure for assessing, is this message the right thing to say?
Got it. Well,
your thoughts?
I think, let me ask you this, because I'm on this whole thing with trust. I have an issue with trust. I'm moving on down to our list here because I want to know from you some definitions of trust and trustworthiness, right? Because I feel like I grew up in a household where I learned not to trust, my father, in a sense. So there's some issues there where, in the past, if you get burned by someone, if you don't, you feel like you could never trust again. And I'm just letting you know, just as a friend, as just our conversationalist here, we're just talking, and it's affected me, my relationships moving forward in life, because, trust is hard to come by, and once someone breaks it, it's very hard to get over, right? And I want people out there to understand what trust is, trustworthiness, and I know you're going to work onto that, and, some critical skills to instill trust in others. But I just want to ask off the bat, a lot of people don't trust, and, it's hard for them to learn this skill of trust. Can you give us any advice on, how we can start to trust, especially those that have been unfortunately dealt a hand of cards of people that are untrustworthy?
Absolutely, and you bring up two terms that I think we ought to kind of distinguish between them. They seem like they're synonyms, but they're slightly different. And that's trust and trustworthiness. To trust is something that I give. I choose to trust you. Trustworthiness, that's my character. I can be worthy of trust in some absolute sense. If there was an absolute scale out there, I could meet that and be totally trustworthy. I'm worthy of your trust because of how I behave, because of what I say. However, you may choose not to trust me. And again, as you pointed out, you choose not to trust because of past experience. If somebody walks in, they're brand new to the job, and the last 5 bosses they had were liars, cheats, whatever, they learned not to trust a boss. They walk into your company, you're boss number 6. They are not going to trust you until finally, someday, you can convince them otherwise. So trust is the impression that we make, or that we conclude. What is my impression of you? Are you worthy of my trust? That's when I'll choose to do that. And the act of trusting somebody is to make oneself vulnerable to the other person's intentions. My wife and I have been married for 48 years, and I trust her totally, completely, without reservations, because I have 48 wonderful years of experience with her. I know her heart. Like you, some dysfunction in the family I came from, and there was some distrust because of experience with my father. And so I didn't want to make myself vulnerable to his intentions. So I think there's, we as leaders, we've got to both, number one, be trustworthy, develop that character that makes us worthy of it, not only our character, but then our behavior, and yet understand, I still have to instill it by causing you to come to the conclusion that I am worthy of your trust. Now, how do you do that? Well, number one, you've got to have sincere intentions. If you're not sincere in your intentions towards another, it's going to come out. I don't think too many of us are Academy Award-winning actors and actresses. So our level of sincerity is eventually going to come out. And if people conclude that we're not sincere, that we're artificial, trust isn't going to happen. So number one, I think trust comes from being sincere. Number two, that you're honest. That you're honest in word and deed, everything you do. And then number three, that you convey to somebody that you're going to keep your promises. You're going to have their back. They can rely on you. So there's some reliability and credibility that goes into trust. So restoring trust takes time. Restoring trust that's been lost. And it takes time together. If you don't trust your friend and you're apart for 20 years, guess what? 20 years later, that lack of trust is still there because you've never had time to bridge whatever the gulf was. So how do you build trust? Well, I think you've got to be present because you got to have a relationship. That's number one. So I think number one, you got to have presence. Number two is what I call principled consistency. In other words, you stick to your principles. You got to have clear and transparent set of guiding principles. What do you live by in the sense of integrity, and what do you think of people, treating people fairly, and so forth? And that you adhere to those values and principles regardless of how difficult the situation is. You show loyalty to the individual. So I like to label that thing principled consistency. Then I think you've got to be poised. What I mean by that is that you got to control your reactions and actions, particularly when you have strong emotions. If you're the type of person that when a situation is difficult, when you're angry, you're upset, you're frustrated, whatever it is, if you have to hang off the deep edge and rant and rave, yell, throw things, so forth, well, you don't have poise. And people are not going to be around you, and they can't trust you in those situations. And then I think another big one that I see leaders violate quite often, and that's punctuality. Being on time, because that's a promise. When you say, I'm going to show up for a meeting, well, we better show up on time, because that's a promise you've made somebody. If you're consistently late, man, how much can they trust you, at least in those areas? Then I think you got to be on time with deliverables. If you promise to give a report,
yes,
to make a phone call, whatever it is, you got to do. I mean, like you and I were scheduled on the hour, right? 11 o'clock, and sure enough, my phone rang because you were incredibly punctual.
Yeah, sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes I am. It all depends, right? There could be an error on the last show. Someone goes over. But go ahead. Let's finish it up. Calm. We still have a few more minutes. I want to hear the rest of it, Ted. We have time. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think the other thing is to keep in mind is that, and I think I've referred to it, but I haven't spoken to it yet, is that trust is arbitrary. People choose who and what and why they trust. It's a choice. Again, people choose to do it. So we've got to keep in mind that it's arbitrary. And number two, it's reciprocal. So you got to oftentimes give trust to get trust. You, as a boss, you may have to make the first gesture. In fact, I think you should make the first gesture in trusting your people. Now, that doesn't mean you don't check on them. And accountability is an important thing to do, and accountability is done the right way, doesn't conflict with trusting people. But you've got to exercise that I trust you. Here's responsibility. I'm going to trust. Yes, we'll hold you accountable. Do you do it or not? But by trust, extending trust, you're going to get trust. And again, I think trust is discreet. I can pick and choose. I may trust you with my wallet, for example, because I trust your character, but I can't trust you to do this job because you don't have the competency. Or it could be the other way around. I trust you can do this job well, but I don't trust you with my wallet because I know that you'll spend my money foolishly. And then I think trust is also very fragile. Sometimes we always are processing what we're seeing and telling ourselves a story. And we're taking the signals from the world, we process them and take in the story. And I've got this wonderful video I often show, and it shows this cement truck driver. Right? He gets in his truck, he's just finished the job, he sees a picture of his wife, and he kind of has a smiling face and so forth. And he's got time, so he drives by his house to say hello to his wife. And as he gets there, he looks in the picture window, and he sees his wife in there, jubilant, waving her arms. She's up in for glee, and she hugs this gentleman who's there and kisses him on the cheek and gives him a hug. Well, this guy is in a rage because, of course, he perceives it as she's cheating on him. So he goes back, drives the dump truck, the cement truck, up against this blue convertible, and dumps the cement into it. He's back up, very proud of himself because he's gotten revenge. He looks in the window again, and now he sees his wife holding one of those big checks like you've won something, and roses, and she's dangling a set of car keys. Because they just won this contest, and the car was the award. And the point of the illustration is that trust was fragile. He took in a little snapshot, didn't understand the full context, came to a conclusion, for a moment didn't trust his wife, and went and destroyed something. It's a pretty funny video. I wish we could show it to the audience. But I think it's the story kind of illustrates that with some people, trust can be incredibly fragile, and we've got to be aware of that as leaders.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to have to end it on there because we are a little over, but I love talking to you, and you're making great conversation, great points today. So, Dr. Ted, how can we contact you?
Again, my email address is TEDavis@grace4success, number 4, success.com, and my cell phone, 913-306-1499.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you back, and looking forward to the next time we get to talk. Don't forget, Grace, the number 4success.com. You have a fantastic day. Are we back again next week?
Yes.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it, Dr. Ted. Have a fantastic day,
Yep.
okay? And happy early holidays. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
When I was little, I didn't talk for a long time. I liked things to always be the same. Anything new or different would scare and upset me. I was very sensitive to lights and sounds. It was almost like I had bigger eyes and ears than everyone else. So I built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. I didn't like looking people in the eye. It made me feel uncomfortable. I'd throw big tantrums over little things like when my socks didn't match. Sometimes I'd do the same things over and over. Until one day, I found out I had autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I learned how to live with it better.
You can see signs of autism in children as young as 18 months. Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.